Over the next hour, we're going to explore some of the joy of these games, the melting pot madness of soccer fans from around the world descending here on the U.S., thrilling victories and heartbreaking losses, Erling Haaland's face and hair. We're also going to discuss some of the challenges, international conflict, the exorbitant cost of enjoying these games, and questions about whether the good vibes were extended to everyone or just an elite few. And we're going to ask, can a global sporting event change us? Can it change how we here in the U.S. see the world, how the world sees us? Can it even change how we see ourselves? We're going to hear from journalists in host cities across the country and learn about how the World Cup tournament is impacting their communities. Along me in studio for this entire journey is NPR World Cup correspondent and host of the podcast The Last Cup, Jasmine Garsd. Hi, Jasmine.
Hi.
Well, first I got to say there is no denying that there's been a lot of joy that these games have brought all over the country and to diaspora communities across the country. I'll say here in Boston, I think most notably was this love affair that broke out between all of these folks who came from Scotland and were in town for 2 weeks and the people of Boston. There was a lot of joy. There was, and that's what, that's, I think, the thing a lot of us here in the Boston area experienced. But you have been traveling all over the place covering this very close, much more closely than I have. What have you seen?
I mean, I've seen just how much joy this has brought different communities in the U.S. And just what it means to certain diasporas. I just think depending on where I've been, it's every time it's been a different community. And you really start to see soccer is international. Soccer is the whole world.
Is there a particular moment along the way or a particular couple of moments that really stick out to you? Especially, as you say, you've covered soccer for a long time. So it's was there something where you're oh, there's something special happening here?
Absolutely. I was in Miami for the Argentina-Cape Verde
nice.
game. The night before, I was in Orlando having Cape Verdean food with a restaurant owner, and we talked about what this meant for the Cape Verdean community. It was the smallest team to have ever made it that far in the World Cup. And then the next day, watching that game, which was the heart attack special, right? It was a spectacular game. It was one of those games that, as a football lover, I was just this is good stuff.
Yeah, this is why we do this. Yeah. All right, well, let's bring a couple more voices in here now. Joining us are a couple of reporters from two host cities. Carlton Gillespie is the Broward County Bureau reporter at NPR member station WLRN in Miami. And we've also got Nick Kariuki, trending news reporter for Billy Penn at WHYY in Philadelphia. Carlton, Nick, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Carlton, Miami is a hub for different cultures, and the World Cup was really an execution of all these cultures coming together in this particular moment. How did it happen in Miami? Tell me about what it told you about the ability of Miami and other places around the country to welcome and celebrate cultural diversity.
Well, it's funny you mention the Cabo Verde team because in Miami, we are an international city, but even still, it's such a small community that it doesn't get noticed here. And I talked to some folks, a lot of them are from up your way in Boston or Providence, who said that people confuse them for Dominicans or Puerto Ricans. But that game against Argentina is the defining cultural moment for this nation, right? I mean, there is no more explanation needed when someone says, I'm from Cape Verde. There's no more, where is that? Or what are they like? They now have this cultural touchstone that just really can solidify that for people. I think that's so important for so many of them.
Absolutely. And something that I have been reporting on is how, it's not just Cape Verde, because there's this narrative that Cape Verde kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Actually, Cape Verde has been playing amazing soccer for the last 10 years. If you've been following African soccer, and African soccer is having this moment.
Well, it's a big moment for Africa, the entire World Cup. I mean, there have never been more teams from Africa in the World Cup than in this World Cup.
Yeah.
All right, Nick, I want to turn to you and bring you in. You are in Philadelphia. One of the things that happened up here in Boston, I think it's distinct from what happened in Philadelphia, and there was a lot of comparison in the lead up to the World Cup about this between the two cities, is that there was a ton of anxiety here in Boston, I think, and I think a lot of people were surprised by how well things went. In contrast, it felt like in the lead up, Philadelphia had really grabbed this thing with two hands and really embraced the coming of the World Cup. So I wonder, in Philadelphia, A, is that accurate? And B, has it met expectations so far?
Yeah, definitely. Philadelphia benefited from hosting the FIFA Club World Cup last summer, and they had several games of that and hit that out of the park and kind of set some standards that some of the host nations for this tournament were able to follow. Going into this tournament, with the paired with the nation's 250th celebration, there were two big concerns, mainly about whether the transportation and infrastructure could handle the influx of fans with those other events going on at the same time. And that's been a resounding success. It's become so convenient, accessible, remaining the same $2.90 for everyone, that it's become a part of the World Cup experience. There were subway carts full of fans chanting and singing, helping to build up the excitement coming down to the games.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, I know in New York and New Jersey, the transportation situation it's been criticized. It's been
Sure.
a little bit nightmarish. I got stuck on one of those trains at one point. I'm just curious, Nick, in Miami, there were also concerns about traffic. How was it?
Well, I ended up going to a game, the Colombia and Portugal, the final group stage match. And unlike Nick in Philadelphia, we do not have a robust transit system at all. So everybody has to drive. And the entrance to the stadium is right off of the Florida Turnpike here. So it did get congested, I think, early on. You have to remember in 2024, the Copa America final was here, and there was a
Oh, I
massive
remember
crowd
the Copa
surge,
America.
which was a security disaster. I mean, maybe one of the worst in North American sports history. And so there were extra precautions taken, but that had impacts to traffic and parking and getting people into the games and where people could enter. But by the time I was there for, I think, the fourth or fifth game that had been in Miami, things were really, really smooth. And it's a testament because we can't get traffic right just about anywhere here in South Florida. So to see it finally come
Right.
together, it was kind of just in time.
This is the World Cup Effect from GBH News in Boston. I'm Edgar Herwick III. I'm in studio with NPR's Jasmine Garsd. We're speaking with Carlton Gillespie from WLRN in Miami and Nick Kariuki with WHYY in Philadelphia. I want to take it outside of the stadium because most people are experiencing this outside of the stadium, even in host cities. Here in Boston, there have been watch parties. The bars have been packed. It's been really fun to see. Nick, what's it like outside of the stadium in Philadelphia?
Yeah, across the city, the interactions between the traveling fans and local Philadelphians have been the biggest highlight. The city's been treated to multiple pep rallies at iconic venues like the front of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, next to the Rocky statue. At one point, a Croatian pep rally that ended up around City Hall crashed a wedding photo shoot between newlyweds Ashton and Zach Smith, and they instantly became celebrities in Croatia. And now there is a fundraising effort to get them to travel for a second honeymoon
Oh
in
my God,
Croatia.
that's amazing.
Wow. Yeah. Also something that I've been enjoying so much is like hearing how tourists view the United States,
Yeah.
right? These stories about falling in love with ranch dressing or parts of your city. I know in Philadelphia, there was like this love affair / beware of the Rocky statue, which is allegedly cursed for fans.
Yep.
Yeah. Nick, tell me a little bit about what you heard from tourists about Philadelphia. And did you hear about this Rocky statue situation with the Ecuador team?
Yes. It became pretty clear that the curse was going on when Ecuador kind of weren't informed of what happens when you put a shirt that isn't a Philly sports team on the
Yeah.
statue. They went on to lose the opening game against Cote d'Ivoire. That was kind of seen as a bit of an upset. And the next game was between Brazil and Haiti, and some Brazilian fans and organizations actually put out a call not to do this and put security around the statue. Uh, I think the tourism officials for the city and the state also kind of put out a similar tongue-in-cheek warning. So I think the way that fan bases were able to kind of come in and embrace those cultures and learn a little more, because everyone around the world is familiar with the story of Rocky, but not so much with some of the other aspects of Philadelphia that they became aware of in their time here.
Carlton, I wonder about in Miami. I mean, nothing against Philadelphia or Boston where we are, but they're not exactly known as international party cities. However, Miami, I think, has a little bit of a reputation of a place where you're going to party anyway. Has it like ramped up a level during the World Cup?
Well, we also had the Scottish team come down here. So anytime the Tartan Army shows up, you have to, it's the most resilient this city's bars have been in quite some time. But yeah, I would say it definitely held up. I mean, even up north in Broward County, the area that I generally cover, Colombian fans had shut down intersections. It was just kind of everywhere you went, there was a party. But there is truly nothing like hearing a Scottish person try and pronounce Caiocho, and just the amount of times, because they marched from what they call Caliocho all the way down to the Marlins Stadium for a baseball game, and they had to step around the roosters that roam the streets there, and watching them get a little bit of culture shock. But a lot of Scottish fans told me the bars didn't run out of drink, so we were in their good graces at least.
That's good. Famously, there was apparently a bar or two up here that either ran low or ran out of drink. So faux pas on our parts. Well done, Miami.
Yeah, would you say, going back to the last Copa America, how would you say the fandoms have been? Have there been fandoms that you're like, wow, those guys really love to party. They're great partiers. Talk to me about the different fandoms, Nick or Carlton.
Yeah, it's a different level because there are some of the same. There's overlap between some of the Copa America teams. Colombia did very well. They went to the final of the Copa America. They had games here in South Florida, but we're talking about a different party event when it comes to the World Cup. It's the difference between a 15th birthday and a sweet 16. There's just something. There's a milestone here when they come, and you can feel it in the way the crowd is reacting to either people that are joining them or locals who are trying to check out what's going on at their local watering hole. There's a brewery near my house, and we went for a Colombian game. We know the owners, they're Colombian. Multiple people that we knew were regulars there looked at us and said, I had no idea that everyone who ran this place was Colombian. And so there was just this kind of nice cultural exchange, but it is a different intensity here with the World Cup than anything that we've had.
How about in Philly, Nick?
Yeah, one of the remarkable things that we noticed here was, as well as like the teams like Brazil, France, the teams that are regularly in the tournament, there were these nations that don't necessarily make the tournament every time. Haiti had not been in the tournament since 1974. Iraq hadn't been since 1986. Curacao, the smallest nation to ever compete in the tournament, had never been in the World Cup. So just the joy of getting this opportunity, sometimes like for the second time, maybe for the first time in their lifetimes, to see their teams play against at this level was remarkable. And then they also enjoyed kind of finding the local diasporas within Philadelphia. I went up to a restaurant in Philadelphia's only neighborhood that was Haitian and was hosting packed watch parties ahead of the game against Brazil. I went to Philadelphia's only Iraqi restaurant where people were making a point before they came from around the country to stop by before the game the next day.
Yeah, I wonder what you both think. We're all touching on this a little bit here, but I think for those of us who live in these cities, it's as if you got to go on a trip to a certain extent to a whole bunch of places that you wouldn't have been able to go to before, but you didn't have to go anywhere. So do you feel like it's been good for the residents of your cities just to see this big international melange of people and these kind of connections that you might not have known about or had before? Is it good for the folks in your cities?
Absolutely. I think it's good for everybody that gets involved. I can tell you a specific example of when that happened to me. It was at the Marlins game where the Tartan Army had kind of invaded and took over Lone Depot Park here. And there was a group of Scottish fans chanting, "No Scotland, no party," which is a chant I'm sure you heard reverberating through the streets there over and over again.
No party.
But we got to add our we got to add our own Miami twist on that because the Scottish fans are chanting, and all of a sudden these Marlins fans with their guidas, which is a like a Caribbean percussion instrument, and it kind of sounds like, and they start playing the guidas along to the beat of the Scottish chant, and it just raised the intensity up, and it was like, well, this is just that kind of beautiful cross-cultural moment that is going to stick with both sides, the fans and the locals, long after the tournament's over.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're touching on something here, which is the economic promise,
Yeah.
right? I mean, FIFA and the host nations were talking about like this is going to be really good for local economies, and that's really something I've been wondering a lot about, especially in New York City. Like, who's benefiting? Is it are immigrant communities benefiting? Are you seeing, Carlton, any kind of sign that this has economically benefited local businesses?
Certainly the bars and restaurants. I talked to a chief economist from the Beer Institute, which is probably the coolest
Beer
job in the world.
Institute? Yeah.
Yeah, this guy was what a cool job this guy has. And he basically told me that it's not just that concession sales at the stadiums are up tremendously, but bars and restaurants and even, at home purchases for people that are having watch parties are up. So, I mean, when it comes to, at least in his instance, beer, which I imagine also means food and places like that are up tremendously. But I know there were problems with hotels filling up, and I think there's a lot of pre-tournament anxiety. But from what I can tell, the streets have been packed with people for watch parties. The restaurants have been packed with people watching games. So we don't have any definitive numbers, but it certainly feels like, at least in the short term, there's been a boost.
All right. We've been speaking with WLRN Broward County Bureau reporter Carlton Gillespie and Nick Kariuki, trending news reporter for Billy Penn at WHYY in Philadelphia. Thank you both for being with us. We just spent some time celebrating the ecstasy of these games, Jasmine, but I do think we have to touch a little bit on the agony. And I'm not talking about tough losses on the pitch either. So, Jasmine, I want to start with ticket prices, for example. I mean, nosebleed seats in the early rounds were $400. And if you're from the outside of the U.S., which many people were, that's on top of your travel costs. And, of course, traveling from some countries, there might have been additional visa costs or complications, or you might not have been able to come at all. So is this a particular issue for these games, or is this just par for the course for an international event like this?
No, I think it's especially bad in these games.
Yeah.
And I think, what we're seeing, to be honest, is that there's been a little bit of the chipping away of the very soul of soccer, of football, which is that anyone can play anywhere and watch, right? I mean, football in part is so widespread globally. It's such a global phenomenon because you can do it anywhere as long as you have a ball-shaped object and you can make 2 goalposts with 2 rocks.
Or 2 kids.
Or your cousins
your
who you don't like.
Yeah, you just be like, make you stand here and you stand there. We're going to kick it right between the 2 of you.
But it has become, I think the critique is it's become a little bit of an oligarchic event, which is really, if you've been tracking the economy and the direction we're heading and who can afford to go to concerts anymore.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
in
who can
line.
afford to go to the grocery store anymore?
It's in line with that K-shaped economy we've been following. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna bring in some more voices with a West Coast. We've been on the East Coast the whole time here, so we're gonna turn to the West. We're joined right now by NPR reporter Arezou Rezvani in Los Angeles, where she's covered the Iranian team's World Cup run, and Natalie Gonzalez Rodriguez from KPBS in San Diego, co-host of the Port of Entry podcast, which tells stories of people who live and travel across the Tijuana-San Diego border. Thank you both for being with us here.
Hi, guys.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Natalie, I want to start with you. So something I've been thinking a lot about in this moment is contrasts, right? When I'm not covering the World Cup, I'm covering immigration. And it's been on my mind that, while I'm reporting at the New Jersey Stadium, I'm about 15 minutes away from the Delaney Hall Immigration Detention Center, where there's been hunger strikes over inhumane conditions. And so I know in your podcast, you've explored the World Cup celebrations as they play out in Tijuana versus in the U.S. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, I think the word to describe this is bittersweet. I mean, there is for sure. There is a contrast that is very unique to this region. And I want to say first that I am in Tijuana right now because I live in Tijuana. I am a transborder person, which means that I cross the border to go to work. I cross back and forth. So I go to San Diego to go to work, and then I go back to Tijuana because I live in Tijuana. And I'm sure that you have seen many reels of people in Mexico City celebrating, which is beautiful. As a Mexican, I wanted to be there. I have never experienced this amount of FOMO in my life before. But I think here in Tijuana, San Diego, like people in this border region, we have experienced this World Cup very differently from people in many other parts of Mexico or the United States or in Canada. Tijuana is a city of migrants. So many people arrive here hoping to reach the US, but for different reasons, they end up staying here, right? So sometimes because they cannot cross, and sometimes because they choose to build a life here. So one example of the contrasts is Tijuana has this large Haitian community, which has been growing since 2016. And actually our border reporter from KPBS, Gustavo Solis, and our port of entry producer, Julio Ortiz, they spent time with members of the Haitian community while they were watching Haiti's World Cup matches. And we have mentioned before that Haiti hadn't qualified for the World Cup since 1974.
Yeah.
So like, imagine like this tournament became like this huge reason for people to come together and celebrate and reconnect with their culture. But also, it sounds so bittersweet and so horrible for two reasons. Like one, I'm sure a lot of them tried to enter the US. When they first arrived to Tijuana, I'm sure they tried to enter the US legally, but they were not able to, and they had to stay in Tijuana. Or they were already in the US for years and they got deported. And I know this for a fact because I spoke a few years ago with a Haitian who was deported and was living in Tijuana. So imagine watching your team finally playing in the World Cup again, but playing in the same country that denied you entrance or that kicked you out.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
Natalia, you've also been talking about being a trans-border person, right? You go back and forth, and something from hearing your podcast that you've been talking about as well is like border crossings and what that's done to like border traffic. For people who don't know, like in Tijuana to San Diego, there's people that's their everyday commute, right? Has it been affected? Has it added to border tensions?
Well, Tijuana is, we know, I don't know if you know this, but Tijuana is home to the busiest land border crossing in the world. So every day there's thousands of people crossing back and forth to go to study, to go to work. I think when we first realized that the World Cup was gonna host some of the matches here in California, specifically in Los Angeles, that is just 2 hours away from Tijuana, my immediate thought was, the border is going to be complete chaos.
Yeah.
Like there's gonna be chaos everywhere. I thought obviously everyone in Tijuana is going to want to go to those games. But then, no, just kidding. Tickets are thousands of dollars. That's not gonna happen. So tickets ended up costing thousands of dollars, making them out of reach for most people. So surprisingly, border traffic here in Tijuana has remained pretty much the same throughout the whole tournament because people cannot afford the tickets to go to see their teams.
Speaking of Los Angeles, Arezou, you spoke with in your reporting, among your great reporting on this, you spoke with Iranian fans in LA, got a bunch of different takes. I want to play a little of one of your reports right now.
People are like getting killed, getting executed. I don't know if I should go there and wear like a t-shirt that says free Iran or just go regular and just support the team. I have no idea right now what I'm gonna do.
I'm actually very prideful and I fully support them. It's our country, it's one team coming out of there, and I believe sports are meant to be for entertainment, and that's all it is. You're supposed to keep politics out.
Arezou, tell us a little bit more about this reporting.
You know, it was such a tangle of emotions for Iranian Americans who were watching this game. I think that the excitement that was experienced by a lot of people was made complicated by the fact that there's been a war in Iran. There's been a massive political crackdown on dissidents this year. And so people have really complicated feelings. I spoke to people who, as you heard, felt like this team was very much an extension of the Iranian government. And they had a really hard time watching the game, buying tickets. They wanted nothing to do with it. There were quite a few protesters outside of the stadium on game days. And then I talked to a number of people, as you heard, who felt like this was, a break from all of the darkness of this last year,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
wanted a break from it. And so they were willing to separate politics from the sports. But as we saw as early as this week, it's really hard to disentangle the two. I mean, we saw President Trump get involved in one of the games. So I think overall it's been a real tangle of emotions for people.
You bring up President Trump getting involved in the games, which took a couple of weeks to really happen in the way that it did around this red card situation. Do you feel like that's a demarcation point? Like that to me, to a certain extent, Jasmine, it did feel that way. That
Like a line was crossed.
like a line was crossed, or
Yeah.
or all of a sudden, you can't, as you two are both pointing out, you can't divorce politics from this completely. But it did feel slightly apolitical up until that moment, and then it feels like something changed. I don't know if that's your experience.
I mean, I think we're talking about like this age-old debate about the arts, about music, about sports, which is it a reprieve from politics, or is it inextricably linked from politics?
Right.
I tend to think the latter, and I do think it was highly politicized with Iran, for example, and even with Haiti playing in the World Cup. But I do think that red card was like a line. The red card situation was a line that got crossed. I don't know. I'm so curious what
Yeah,
you
Natalie,
think.
Arezou,
Yeah.
how have you experienced that?
I mean, I think Iranians have seen how this has been made political for a very long
Yeah,
time. I
yeah.
mean, in the lead up to this game, there was so much drama, right? There was talk about replacing Iran's team with Italy's team, a team that did not qualify for this World Cup. There was huge delays with issuing visas for this team. A number of staff were denied visas because of their alleged links to the Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is designated as a terrorist organization, but which many people have to serve in because of compulsory military service. And then, of course, once the team did get their visas, there were huge restrictions placed on their travel. So they
Yeah.
didn't get to acclimate the same way that a lot of other teams did. And so they did feel like this was made very political. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen said that he danced a happy dance. Those are his words, when Iran was eliminated.
Yeah.
And so I think the feeling among Iranians was that even if they tried to disentangle the two and keep sports separate from politics, that it just wasn't made to be that way.
Well, and really, whether or not you think that politics affects sports, it does. I mean, there was a lot of conversation just on a technical level of what that commute for Iranian players did to their physical capabilities. I mean, as Natalie was saying, it is already like the commute can take a while, but when you're telling a team that they have to go back every night and it's a 4-hour commute each day, and they just had a grueling maybe 120 or 90-minute game, that's a lot. Natalie, what do you think about this conversation about like, is sports devoid of politics, and how have we seen it?
I mean, now that we're talking about the Iranian team, I want to bring back to the conversation what we were saying at the beginning about the contrasts.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible, again, me living here in Tijuana, it's impossible to ignore this contrast of how the Iranian team was treated one way when they crossed the physical line, and then was treated another way, completely different, when they were crossing back. Because here in Tijuana, hundreds of Tijuanenses, as we know, they were staying here in Tijuana, and hundreds of Tijuanenses, they gathered outside their hotel to cheer them on. Like, fans brought mariachi, asked players to sign their jerseys, their FIFA sticker albums. They made them feel genuinely welcome. There was a lot of coverage everywhere about the warmth and the hospitality that the team received from the city, from Tijuanenses. But you cannot ignore this contrast that the team had to travel across the border, the long commutes, the logistical challenges because of geopolitical restrictions. If anything, I think this World Cup here in this region has brought thousands of people together, sure, and that's beautiful, but it is also reminding us that not everyone has the same freedom to travel or even to support their national team in the same way. And it questions us. It makes us question who can cross freely and who is welcome to this World Cup, and who has to stay in their spot because they're not welcome.
And I think even outside of, even if we're not talking about crossing borders, just who feels safe to go out and celebrate in the way that people, are going out and celebrating? Does everybody feel equally safe to be like, I'm going to go out and party?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a lot of the reporting that I did in Queens in New York, which is, super diverse immigrant community. And not only were people telling me there's no way I can afford to go watch this game in person, but I was also hearing people saying, areas of Queens have been very heavily raided by immigration officials and saying, I don't necessarily feel safe partying out on the streets right now as an immigrant person. I'm wondering if either of you saw that in Arezou, you in LA. Did you see that environment of maybe being out on the streets is not for me right now?
I did not pick up on that. And I think that, it's interesting to hear you guys talk about the safety, the feeling of being safe going out and about, because I feel like whereas the Iranian American diaspora may not have felt that exactly, I certainly think that lost in a lot of this conversation has been the fact that Iranian athletes don't often feel safe when they're traveling. And, the Iranian athletes have long been under a great deal of pressure from the Iranian government to act a certain way, not to speak up on politics. Those who do are very severely punished. And I think that, as people were debating whether or not to support this team and whether or not this team is an extension of the government, what wasn't, I think, adequately addressed is the fact that when Iranian athletes travel, they are heavily monitored. And there are people watching and making sure that they don't seek asylum, that they don't run away. There have been a number of cases of Iranian athletes who have. And we saw it as recently as February, March. Iran's national soccer team, the women's team, they were traveling to Australia. Several of them sought asylum. In the end, several of them gave that up because of threats to their family, allegedly. And so I think it's worth noting that as much pressure as there is on fans and people on this side and pressure from the US government, there's also this less visible pressure that sometimes comes from the home country as well.
All right, that's NPR's Arezou Rezvani in Los Angeles. We've also been speaking with Natalie Gonzalez Rodriguez from KPBS in San Diego. Thank you both for being with us. Well, all good things, Jasmine, must come to an end. For our remaining time, though, we're going to take a look at what comes after the final match on July 19th, when the crowds leave, when the dust settles. Will any of this newfound global connection actually stick? Will cities keep late bar hours, transportation schedules? Will they be better? Jasmine, am I foolish to think that anything can last? There's a great piece I read, I think it was in The Guardian, and the writer said something along the lines of, like, big international sporting events have their way of imposing a temporary reality. And that word temporary really struck out, because I'm like, no, but maybe some of this can guide us forward. Am I a fool?
Well, I think what's happened here is, there's been a sort of hunger for this image that is projected back to Americans about who we are that happened with this World Cup, right? For the last 15 or 16 months, Americans have been told by the government, it's from the top down, that the U.S. is closed for business, that we're closed to outsiders, that we're a xenophobic nation, that we don't want people from the outside coming in. And I think people really loved the image that was projected to us from these visitors, these tourists coming in. And that says something, right?
It absolutely says something. I think you're touching on something, because I think even if you're a person who doesn't believe that we are a xenophobic people, who doesn't believe that we ought to be closed off to the world, if you hear it enough, it does seep in. I had a conversation with a guy from Scotland, and he said something to me that kind of shook me. We were talking about exactly this. And he said, and I think it's good for America to remember that you have friends too. Right. Like, because there is this feeling, if you read the headlines, it's like, in the political class, it feels like everybody's at odds with each other. And to hear just a human being be like, no, you have friends in the world. I was like, wow, I needed that. I didn't even know I needed that.
I think there's a thirst for that. And I will say, though, of course, it's not a magic pill. We didn't just have 2 months of celebration and camaraderie and, well, nothing else is happening in the background. It's not a magic solution, but I do think it's indicative of a desire to be something else at our core? I think we should ask our guests.
Yeah, let's keep this conversation going. We've got two folks joining us. We've got GBH News reporter Esteban Bustillos, who's here with us in studio in Boston, and Celisa Calacal, race and culture reporter for KCUR in Kansas City. Welcome to you both. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So, Lisa, take us to Lawrence, Kansas, where the Algerian national team had its home base. Talk to us about what that looked like.
Yeah, so I'm based in Kansas City, and Lawrence is a college town about 45 minutes away. It's a small college town, very charming. And I would say they pulled out all the stops for Algeria. If you walk up and down the main street thoroughfare, there's Algerian flags everywhere. This local artist recreated the Algerian flag on a field by the University of Kansas. The film festival that programs every summer in Lawrence included Algerian films as part of their slate. Restaurants also pulled out a lot of stops for Algerian visitors. They, some of them made traditional Algerian dishes as their weekly specials. A lot of them pulled pork from their menu to become more halal friendly. And there was just this really beautiful embracing of the Algerian team and their visitors that I found very charming.
Celisa, did it take you by surprise? Was this something that maybe you didn't see coming, or did it feel like it just sort of organically, spontaneously happened, or did it feel planned?
I would say it felt organic and authentic to Lawrence's character. It is, it's flagship university, the University of Kansas. They get a lot of international students. They're always welcoming students every year from different parts of the world and different parts of the country. So I would say Lawrence has baked into its character of being a welcoming city. So it didn't necessarily surprise me that they decided to embrace the Algerian national team and its visitors. I think what surprised me is just how viral it all went. And I think it surprised the locals there too about how their authenticity and just their, this love affair that they had really captured the hearts and minds of people so far away from Lawrence, Kansas.
So, Lisa, what do you make, though, of that conversation of what that surprise tells us about what Americans want and how they want to see themselves and, what the takeaways are from this World Cup? You're right there. Talk to us.
Yeah. It reminds me, I had a great conversation with an Arab American journalist who lives in Lawrence. She's been living there for about 20 plus years. And for her to be able to be part of this community, welcoming people who also speak Arabic, people who have similar backgrounds as her from the Middle East or Arab American, she was able to feel, connected with them. And she said that the way that Lawrence embraced Algeria is like a microcosm, a reflection of what America should be and could be. We can be a welcoming nation, and we can see it in Lawrence, Kansas. Like, Kansas is obviously a very red state, voted for Trump several times. But then in the middle of Kansas, you have a college town that is embracing different cultures, different kinds of people. So from her perspective, and she was saying too, 5 years ago, if you heard of a bar in Lawrence that decided not to serve alcohol to be accommodating to Muslim visitors who don't drink, it would probably had been received negatively. But when they did it for the World Cup just a few weeks ago, everyone thought it was, the greatest thing ever, and just a very natural and organic thing to do to make people feel welcome.
All right, I'm going to turn over to Esteban Bustillos here with us. Esteban, what are some of the connections you've seen being made around here, and can the good times go on?
Yeah, actually, just to go back to Kansas, one of my favorite moments of the World Cup, I think there was a news report, a newscaster, and one of the KU sort of slogan is "Rock Chalk Jayhawk," and this older guy was like, "Rock Chalk Algeria," incredible stuff, things you would never expect to see in America. I think in terms of like moments that sort of stick out to me, I was talking to a guy because I went to the Iraq-Norway game here, and he was from Iraq. His English wasn't that great, but he came to the game from Iraq. Something that's very, very difficult to do right now, given that there's huge visa restrictions on people from that country. I think that sort of showed to me just like how much this means to people. I think we have a cut here, Edgar. Actually, I want to play from Tyler McNally, an American fan. You're talking about like what this means for this country right now, and he was talking about what this, not only just the idea of this U.S. men's run, but just having the World Cup here, what it meant for Americans.
It's showing that even within the times that we're going through, a little bit of tribulation, we're still America, we're still here, we're still united when it comes to our sports.
And I think also, like, it's not just about people who we think of broadly speaking as Americans, but people who have come to this country who have made themselves Americans. You know, one of the stories I did was about this Moroccan barber shop where I get my hair cut, by the way. And shout out to Alice Barber
your
Shop.
hair is looking
thanks.
mighty sweet.
Shout out Alice Barber Shop. But the owner, Jake Snooty, is from Morocco, but has embraced really both sides of his heritage, both American and Moroccan.
That's beautiful. Can I switch to talk to you about some technical stuff about
Yes.
soccer? I've been wanting to talk to you about this.
100%.
So this World Cup has featured some new technologies and policies that are different from prior World
Hydration
Cups.
breaks.
Hydration breaks.
Pausa de hidratación, man. It's,
Oh my goodness. It's basically 4 quarters now.
Yeah.
And the evil VAR video review. What do you make about how people are feeling about VAR and hydration breaks? And speaking about what's going to last, do you think, given the reception, we're going to see that again in 4 years?
We don't have to wait that long. We'll see what happens next year with the Women's World Cup, right, in Brazil.
Right.
So, I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
The hydration breaks, it is funny because the idea was like, well, it's really hot in America in the summer, but they were in place too for the indoor air-conditioned stadiums. So
Right.
that's a whole... I mean, this is FIFA we're dealing with, right? This is not necessarily the most logical group of people. It's because it's about the ad dollars, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So
I
much
mean,
money. So much
Tag
money.
America.
Yeah, and I don't have a club I follow, so I can't say like I cared about it that much. I am a every 4 years sort of a soccer person. If it's going to make FIFA money, I think it's going to stay. Maybe just to the chagrin of others. The VAR thing, it's interesting because it's become so like ubiquitous. It was first used in 2018 at the World Cup in Russia, right? So it hasn't been around that long. I don't think it's ever been this controversial, whether that was the red card that was given to Folarin Balogun and then taken away because of VAR, or yesterday's Argentina-Egypt game where VAR played a huge role.
Yep.
Not as big as a role as Egypt's defense falling apart, but still. So I don't see those going away. It goes back to a conversation we had at the Curiosity Desk of like, when with the robo umps in baseball, what do we care about more in sports? The action or the accuracy?
Right.
This is the World Cup Effect from GBH News in Boston. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. I'm in studio with NPR's Jasmine Garsd and Esteban Bustillos from GBH. We're also on the line with KCUR reporter Celisa Calacal. Well, we have very little time left, so I do want to talk about what we hope stays around. Celisa, you talked about these amazing moments happening in Lawrence. I mean, do you think any of this is going to be lasting? Does it change, the community there at all, or no?
I think it doesn't necessarily change the community, but I think the memories of Algeria's presence just reinforces the welcoming nature of Lawrence. And I think it put a spotlight on some of the Middle Eastern restaurants in the town as well. And they got a boost from the visitors, and they're hoping that kind of continues as time goes on.
How about, and this is for both of you actually, how about the notion of, and this bubbles up every so often, but, Americans' relationship with the sport of soccer, with the sport of football. Does this light a fire under that? Will we see bigger embrace? What does it mean for MLS? What does it mean for young soccer players? Anything?
It's something I thought about is like with MLS, like 1994 World Cup here in the U.S., Major League Soccer is around because of that, very specifically, right? Yeah. Here now, it's been here again. Will we see? The majority of MLS teams have their own soccer-specific stadiums. I think that's going to get to the point where every team will have to have one soon. Like, what will that mean just for the just the fan communities here? Looking forward, 2031, the Women's World Cup. The only bidder is the U.S., Jamaica, Mexico, Costa Rica. So 5 years from now, we could have another World Cup experience. 2038, the U.S. could host it again. Like, how much would having not a 30-year gap, but just a 12-year gap mean just for the excitement that we've seen in the sport just in this year? What could that mean to help grow the game? I think it could do a lot.
Celisa, what do you think? A professional soccer team coming to Lawrence, Kansas now?
Ooh, I don't know about that, but Lawrence is not that far away from Kansas City. And Kansas City, we have really embraced our women's soccer team, the KC Current. Their stadium is really close to where I live. It's always packed. I would say the KC Current, people really love women's soccer here. And I think that energy will continue into 2031 as well.
So
Yeah.
we're coming to the end here, Jasmine. What do you honest to God? What do you hope, if anything, does stick around from this?
I think two things. I think this vision of the U.S. as a place that is not closed to the rest of the world has been something that is worth, thinking about and exploring. And also exploring, why people are so thirsty to see that. Thirsty is a weird word, but hopeful.
Hydration break.
Hydration. I'm thinking about hydration
Thirst is
break.
on your mind. What can you do?
But I do hope one of the things that has been really exciting is to see people who have never watched soccer get really excited about it. I mean, my father-in-law, who is a massive Knicks and Mets fan.
Knicks fan? He must be. He's
over
floating
the moon.
on cloud nine right now.
But he texts me sometimes, or he calls me, and he's like, "Did you see that game?" And I'm like, "David, since when do you watch soccer? This is amazing." It has been a little sometimes people are giving opinions who have never heard of what an offside is. But I do hope it sticks. I hope that love of this beautiful game sticks.
Yeah. How about for you, Esteban?
In terms of what I hope sticks,
Yeah.
I think just this World Cup, we're talking about the U.S. I think it's again, can the game grow? Are we going to see a more substantial increase, specifically on the men's side? The women's side, we don't need to worry about it.
They've won 4 World Cups.
They're going to play for their
the
5th
US
next year in
team.
Brazil.
Yeah.
But I think it's just again, will they care about it? But also, broadly speaking, sort of something we talked about is this idea of what do we value as people, and talking to people from other nations, or people who maybe are in our communities we don't really know, right? That the Cape Verdeans got a huge platform in this World Cup. The Moroccans have a huge platform here locally, and just really embracing those people. And then on the other hand, our government be we don't want a certain sort of group of people here. 2038, if the United States is hosting again, what will we be valuing then?
Yeah.
Who will be in power saying who is and who isn't allowed? I think those are huge questions, not just for the game, but just for our country and the ideas of, again, what it means to be an American.
Celisa, what's your lasting memory and hope for what's going to stick around?
Oh gosh, I think a lasting memory for me is just talking to all the Algerian fans in Lawrence and hearing from them how welcome and at home they felt in Lawrence, Kansas, of all places. So I think I would say the rest of the country could learn some lessons from the way that Lawrence really embraced and fell in love with this Algerian team, and the way they were so willing to learn about another culture.
All right, we've been speaking with KCUR race and culture reporter Celisa Calacal and GBH news reporter Esteban Bustillos. Thank you both for being with us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Final look at our YouTube poll. We've got the World Cup is a global unifier at 28%, a celebration with complexities at 25%, a distraction from bigger issues at 8%, and all of the above at 39%. Jasmine, we're just about out of time. Final thoughts, if any.
Oh, I think we still have some really exciting games ahead of us, and I'm excited to see what happens with soccer in the U.S. I think we might be finally at a turning point.